Hannah Martin drove along the long country road that led back to the place where she grew up. The sky stretched wide and open above her. A soft blue that looked almost too calm for how restless she felt inside. She had spent nearly 10 years living in the busy city, working long hours, eating quick meals, and watching life move past her, like it was on fast forward. Coming home felt like stepping into a story she had paused a long time ago. Everything was familiar, but everything also felt different. Her father's old house, the quiet fields, the slow rhythm of the town, none of it had changed, yet she had changed in ways she was only beginning to understand. She had returned because her father had passed the year before, and though the house still stood strong, the land around it hadn't been cared for in a long time. Fences leaned, the barn roof needed fixing, and weeds had grown tall where her father once kept a tidy garden. The city had given her work and money, but not peace, and certainly not the family she once imagined she would have by now. She was 32, steady in her career, but tired in her heart. The idea of starting a family had been on her mind for years, but life had not unfolded the way she expected. She had tried dating, tried waiting, tried hoping, but nothing had felt right. Now she was back in her hometown, not only to take care of her father's property but to quietly think about a decision she had never believed she would consider alone. She wanted to be a mother. She did not know how, or when, or what path she should take, but she knew this desire had grown too strong to ignore. On her second day back, she noticed that her father's old truck wouldn't start. She needed hay for the small patch of land where her father used to keep a few animals, and everyone in town knew that the best place to buy hay was the McRee Ranch. The McRee family had lived on that land for generations, and though most of the older family members had passed, the ranch was now run by Eli McRee, a quiet man who had been a year ahead of her in school. Hannah had seen him around when they were younger, but he had barely spoken to anyone even then. He walked with a soft step, like he didn't want to disturb the ground, and he always kept his hat low over his eyes. People described him as shy, gentle, hard-working, and extremely private. When Hannah pulled up to the ranch, the evening sun was hanging low, giving everything a golden glow. She parked near the barn and stepped out, brushing dust from her jeans. For a moment, she stood still, taking in the peaceful quiet of the place. She could hear cattle in the distance, a dog barking somewhere near the pasture, and the faint sound of hooves thudding against dirt. It felt like she had stepped into another world. Eli appeared from behind the barn, carrying a coil of rope over his arm. He stopped when he saw her, blinking as though unsure whether she was real, or perhaps just a memory of someone he once knew. He wasn't much older than her, maybe 33, but there was something timeless about the way he moved, calm and steady, like the land itself. "Hannah?" he said softly. His voice was warm, yet hesitant, as if he wasn't quite certain he should speak her name out loud. She smiled, even though her heart felt nervous for reasons she couldn't explain. "Hi, Eli. I hope I'm not interrupting anything." He shook his head and set the rope down carefully, as though it were something breakable. "No. Just finishing up for the day." "What brings you here?" Hannah explained that she needed hay, and Eli nodded slowly, listening without saying much. He always listened that way quietly, with full attention, and something about it made Hannah feel strangely at ease. With most people, silence felt heavy or awkward, but with Eli, it felt natural, like part of the air around them. "I can load a few bales in your truck," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Just give me a minute." He walked toward the storage shed, and Hannah followed. The shed smelled of dried grass and wood, and the hay bales were stacked neatly against one wall. Eli lifted them with ease. Strong from years of ranch work, Hannah watched him in silence, grateful and a little moved by his simple kindness. While he worked, she found herself speaking without thinking too hard about it. She talked about returning home, about her father's land, about the quiet of the town compared to the city. Eli didn't interrupt. He only nodded occasionally, offering small comments that showed he was listening. His presence made her feel safe enough to say more than she usually did to people she barely knew. The more she talked, the more her thoughts drifted to the thing that had been weighing on her for months. She wasn't sure why she felt the urge to say it out loud to someone she hadn't seen in years. No less, but the words slipped out softly, almost by accident, as if her heart had spoken, before her mind could stop it. "I've been thinking about having a child," she said quietly. The moment the words left her lips, she realized how strange it sounded, how deeply personal. She wasn't even sure why she had shared it. Maybe because Eli felt safe. Maybe because she didn't have anyone else to talk to. Or maybe because her heart had been carrying the thought alone for too long. Eli stopped mid-movement. He was lifting a bale of hay, but his hands froze. He didn't drop it, didn't stumble, didn't panic. He simply stood still, like every part of him had suddenly locked in place. The only thing that moved was his eyes, which lifted slowly to meet hers. Hannah felt her cheeks warm. "I didn't mean I know that's a lot to say. I guess I've been thinking about my life, and time, and what I want." For a long moment, Eli didn't speak. His face wasn't angry or confused, it was more like he was struggling to understand why she was telling him something so personal. Or maybe he understood perfectly, and that was what startled him. He set the hay bale down gently, dust rising around his boots. "That's important," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's something a person should think carefully about." Hannah nodded quickly. "I know. I've been thinking about it for a while." She waited for him to say something else. But he didn't. Instead, he turned slightly, as though unsure where to look. His silence wasn't cold. It was thoughtful, almost tender. But it was also clear he didn't know how to respond. Eli had always been slow with words, careful with them. And this topic wasn't small. It wasn't like asking him about the weather or the price of hay. He finally reached for another bale, though his movements were slower, less sure. "I didn't expect to hear something like that today," he admitted quietly. Hannah gave a small, nervous laugh. "I didn't expect to say it." They stood there for a moment, both unsure what to say next. The sun had dipped behind the hills, leaving a soft orange glow across the sky. A light breeze moved through the grass, carrying the smell of fresh hay and earth. Eli cleared his throat gently. "It's a big thing to want. A child, I mean." "I know." Hannah folded her arms, rubbing them lightly, though she wasn't cold. "I guess I'm just at a point where I'm tired of waiting for life to be perfect before I make decisions. I thought I'd be married by now. I thought I'd have a family. But things change, and life doesn't always follow the plan you thought it would." Eli listened again, eyes soft with sympathy he didn't quite know how to express. He didn't have many words, but the ones he offered were sincere. "I'm sorry it's been hard," he said. "It hasn't been bad, just different." She smiled faintly. "I guess I'm trying to figure things out." Eli nodded slowly, then picked up the last bale and walked it to her truck. Hannah followed, grateful for the quiet time to collect her thoughts. When he finished loading the hay, he stepped back and wiped his hands again, a nervous habit she had noticed earlier. "Thank you," she said, meeting his eyes. "For the hay. And for listening." He nodded. "Anytime." But as she turned to open the truck door, she sensed something in him, some small hesitation, like he wanted to say more but didn't know how. She paused, waiting, giving him a chance. Eli opened his mouth, then closed it again. His cheeks flushed slightly beneath his tan skin, and he shook his head with a shy smile. "Take care, Hannah." "You too," she said warmly. She climbed into the truck and drove away, but as she glanced at the rearview mirror, she saw him still standing there, watching her go, his expression thoughtful and unreadable. He didn't know what to think about what she had said, but he knew one thing clearly. Her words had stayed with him, settling somewhere deep inside, where thoughts become questions, and questions become something more. And Hannah, driving home through the slow golden light, felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. The sense that her life, uncertain as it was, had just shifted in a way she didn't yet understand. The morning after visiting Eli's ranch, Hannah woke early to the sound of birds outside her bedroom window. The sunlight touched the old wooden floor of her father's home, and for the first time since returning, she felt a sense of calm. She made herself a cup of coffee and stepped onto the porch. The gentle breeze moved through the trees, carrying memories of childhood summers spent playing in the yard, running barefoot on the grass, and feeding the animals her father once kept. But today wasn't about memories. Today was about getting things done. The land needed a lot of care. Her father's fences had grown weak, the barn roof needed attention, and the small field where he once grew vegetables was covered with weeds. Hannah set down her cup and grabbed a pair of gloves. She wasn't afraid of hard work. The city had taught her how to handle pressure, but the land would teach her something different: patience and quiet strength. After hours of pulling weeds, clearing fallen branches, and sorting the old tools in the shed, she realized she needed much more help than she expected. She wiped sweat from her forehead and looked around, wondering where to start next. That was when she heard the low growl of a truck approaching. A familiar dusty blue pickup rolled up the driveway. Hannah recognized it even before it stopped. Eli stepped out, wearing his usual work clothes, faded jeans, a simple shirt, and his hat pulled low over his eyes. Hannah blinked, surprised. "Eli, did I forget something at your ranch yesterday?" He shook his head. "No, I was just passing by." His voice held a shy tone, the kind that made it hard to know if he was telling the full truth. "Saw your gate open. Thought I should check if everything's all right." Hannah smiled. "Everything's fine, just a lot of work." Eli looked around. His eyes moved slowly over the broken fence posts, the toppled water trough, and the barn that leaned a little too far to the left. He didn't say anything for a moment, but she saw the thoughtful look forming on his face. "You're doing all this by yourself?" he asked softly. "For now," she replied. "But I'll manage." Eli nodded once, then without another word, walked back to his truck, grabbed a toolbox, and headed straight for the broken fence. He didn't ask permission. He didn't make a big announcement. He simply began working, removing bent nails, replacing cracked boards, and checking where the posts needed tightening. Hannah stood there for nearly a full minute, watching him in confusion and a growing warmth in her chest. "You don't have to do that," she said finally, walking toward him. He didn't stop working. "I know, but you are doing it anyway." He continued tightening a hinge and said softly, "Your father helped my family a lot when I was younger. Fixing a fence is nothing." Hannah didn't argue. She knew enough about Eli to understand that he didn't help people for praise. He helped because that was the kind of person he was: steady, kind, and quietly generous. They worked side by side for a while. Eli fixed the fence while Hannah cleared the yard, but every time she looked up, she found him watching her with a thoughtful expression, as if he was trying to understand her in a way he never had before. After the fence was repaired, Eli walked toward the shed and checked some tools that had rusted. He cleaned them with care, as though tending to old friends. The sun warmed the air, and the silence between them felt gentle, not awkward. At one point, Hannah took a break and offered him a cold drink. He accepted it with a slight nod, sitting on the edge of the porch as he took slow sips. "You work hard," he said after a moment. "So do you," she replied. He gave a faint smile, the kind that appeared only for a second and then slipped away. "I'm used to it." They sat quietly for a while. The kind of quiet that didn't need to be filled, but Hannah felt the pull to speak. Not about her deepest thoughts like yesterday. Just about simple things: her job in the city, the long nights she had spent in her office, the feeling of coming home to an empty apartment. Eli listened quietly, never interrupting, never rushing her words. When she finished, he looked down at the drink in his hand. "You must have felt lonely," he said in a soft voice. She wasn't expecting him to say that, yet it was true. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Did you ever feel lonely running this whole ranch by yourself?" He paused. It was the kind of question he didn't usually answer, but Hannah waited patiently. Eli kept his eyes on the land. "Sometimes," he said finally, "but the ranch keeps me busy. And the animals, they need someone. I guess that's enough for me most days." Hannah nodded. She understood that kind of quiet life. There was peace in it, but also emptiness when the sun went down. Later in the afternoon, they drove together to the feed store. Eli insisted she ride with him so she wouldn't have to take her father's old truck, which still had a small engine problem. She agreed, and the drive became another gentle moment. Windows rolled down, warm wind brushing across their faces, and the scent of pine trees filling the truck. They didn't say much, but the silence felt comfortable. A kind of growing connection hung between them, something neither fully understood yet. As they loaded supplies into the truck at the feed store, an old friend of her father spotted them. "Well, look at that," the man said with a friendly grin. "Eli McRee working with young Hannah Martin. Didn't think I'd see that." Eli's cheeks turned slightly pink, and he straightened his hat. Hannah just laughed politely. Small towns always notice things. It didn't mean anything, she told herself. Even though a small part of her wondered why the words made her heart beat a little faster. On the way back, Eli asked quietly, "Are you staying here for good?" "I'm not sure," she admitted. "I'm taking things day by day." He nodded as though he understood. "If you need help with the land, I'm around." "Thank you," she said softly. "It means a lot." But she saw the way he gripped the steering wheel, as if the offer cost him something, maybe courage, maybe worry, maybe something deeper he didn't have words for. Over the next week, Eli began stopping by more often. Sometimes he brought tools. Sometimes he just checked the fences. Sometimes he said he was nearby anyway, though Hannah suspected he drove out of his way just to make sure she was all right. They built a quiet rhythm together. They repaired the barn door. They trimmed the trees near the driveway. They shared simple meals. Sandwiches, lemonade, leftover pasta she cooked the night before. Every small moment felt natural, like they had known each other longer than they actually had. Eli wasn't talkative, but when he spoke, it was honest, and Hannah found herself opening up to him more than she expected. She told him about her life in the city, her job, her dreams, and sometimes her worries. She didn't mention the conversation about wanting a child again, but she sensed that he hadn't forgotten. His eyes sometimes carried a quiet thoughtfulness when he looked at her, as though he was still trying to understand what exactly she had meant. One evening, as the sun was setting and the sky turned shades of pink and gold, Hannah stood near the pasture watching the light fall across the fields. Eli walked up beside her, silent as always. "It's peaceful here," she said. He nodded. "That's why I stayed." "Do you ever wish for something more?" she asked softly. Eli looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were deep, steady, and unsure at the same time. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I just don't always know how to reach for it." Hannah understood that feeling too well. They stood there in the quiet evening, two people who didn't have all the answers but were slowly learning something about trust, companionship, and the unexpected ways lives could intertwine. What neither of them said out loud but both quietly felt was that something between them was beginning to change. Something gentle, something hopeful, something they didn't yet have a name for. The storm arrived earlier than the weather report had predicted. One moment the sky was a gentle gray, and the next moment dark clouds rolled in like heavy blankets pushed across the sky. Hannah noticed the change while she was finishing up chores outside. The wind picked up, bending the tall grass and sending a shiver through the trees. She looked toward the horizon and felt worry rise in her chest. Her father's house had always been sturdy, but the roof wasn't in the best shape anymore. The storm looked stronger than anything the valley had seen recently. She needed to get inside quickly. Just as she hurried toward the porch, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Eli. "Storm's coming fast," he said, his voice steadier than the weather. "You all right over there?" "I think so," she said, glancing nervously at the sky. "But the wind is strong. I'm heading inside." There was a pause, soft but full of thought. "If the power goes out over there, call me," he said. "I'm close by." She thanked him, though she didn't expect the situation to get that bad. She locked the windows, checked the doors, and brought out candles and a flashlight. Just in case. She remembered storms from her childhood sitting inside with her father, while the rain hammered the roof and thunder rolled through the valley like giant footsteps. This storm, however, felt different. The wind howled against the walls, and the rain fell in thick sheets, blurring everything outside. Within minutes, the lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. The house fell into darkness. Hannah stood still for a moment, listening to the storm beat against the walls. She tried turning on the flashlight. Nothing. The batteries had died. She reached for the candles, but the matches she found were damp, probably from years of being shoved in a drawer. The storm kept getting louder. The wind whistled through tiny cracks, and a sudden thump outside made her jump. Before she could even decide what to do, her phone buzzed again. "You lost power?" Eli asked. "Yes," she whispered, relieved to hear his voice. "Everything went out." There was another pause. Then, gently but firmly, he said, "Stay where you are. I'm coming." She didn't argue. Something about the certainty in his voice made her feel safe enough to trust him completely. She moved to the window and saw headlights cutting through the rain a few minutes later. Eli's truck pulled up in front of the house, the wipers fighting against the heavy downpour. He rushed up the porch steps, soaked from the storm. When she opened the door, he gave a small breath of relief. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Just a little scared. The house feels different in the dark." Eli stepped inside, removing his wet hat and shaking off some rain. Storm like this can make anything feel different. He brought a lantern, old but reliable, and its warm glow instantly made the room feel safer. He set it on the kitchen table and checked a few things around the house, making sure windows were sealed and the back door was locked. Hannah watched him move with quiet confidence, grateful for his steady presence. When he returned to the kitchen, she was waiting with 2 cups of warm tea. She had managed to heat water on the gas stove. He gave her a small smile that made her chest feel strangely warm. "You didn't have to make me anything," he said. "I wanted to," she replied softly. They sat together at the table, listening to the storm outside. The lantern light flickered gently between them. It was quiet for a few moments. The kind of quiet that feels full, rather than empty. Hannah wrapped her hands around her cup. "Thank you for coming. I didn't know what to do." "You're not alone out here," he said simply. "You don't have to face everything by yourself." His words touched her more deeply than she expected. After a moment, she looked down at her tea and felt the old question rise inside her, the one she had accidentally spoken aloud weeks ago. Eli sensed her shift in mood. "Something on your mind?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "Yes, but I don't know how to say it." "You can say anything," he said, his voice kind and steady. She took a slow breath. "Remember what I told you at the ranch? About wanting a child?" Eli's hand paused halfway to his cup. His eyes lifted to hers, calm but also cautious. "I remember." She looked down again. "I know it must have sounded strange. I didn't plan to say it, but I've been thinking about my life for a long time. And that's something I truly want. Not someday far away. Not if everything becomes perfect. Just truly want." Eli sat quietly, absorbing her words as though they were fragile. The lantern light cast soft shadows across his face, highlighting the care in his expression. "I thought," he said slowly, "that maybe you were telling me because you wanted to ask me something." Hannah felt her heart catch. "I wasn't asking you. Not directly." She hesitated, then added honestly, "But I didn't rule it out either." Eli's breath seemed to stop for a moment. His eyes softened, but his hands remained still on the table. "I didn't know how to answer," he admitted. "I'm not good with big things like that. I didn't want to say the wrong thing." "You didn't," she said softly. He looked at her again, long and thoughtful. "When you said it that day, I didn't know what you meant. I just knew it mattered to you. And if something matters to you, I want to understand it." Hannah felt something warm bloom in her chest. "I didn't tell you because I expected anything from you, Eli. You've already done so much. I just I trust you. And I don't say things like that to people unless I trust them. Eli lowered his gaze to his hands. I'm not a bold man, Hannah. I've lived on this ranch my whole life. I've never been good with speaking or knowing what to say. But, he paused, choosing his words with care. When you said you wanted a child, it didn't scare me for the reason you might think. Then, what scared you? She asked gently. He lifted his eyes again, and this time there was something raw and honest in them. I was scared, because the idea of you needing something so important, and me wanting to be part of your life, felt bigger than anything I've ever let myself imagine. Hannah stared at him, stunned by his honesty. The lantern flickered again, casting a warm glow over both of them. You want to be part of my life? She whispered. He nodded, slow but certain. I think I've wanted that for a while now. I just didn't know if I had the right to feel that way. You do, she said, her voice soft but sure. You do, Eli. The storm continued beating against the house, but inside the kitchen it felt calm. A quiet space filled with understanding that had been building for weeks now. Eli reached for his cup again, but his hand trembled slightly. He wasn't fearless, but he was sincere. That mattered more than anything. I don't know anything about raising a child, he said honestly. But I know how to care for something. I know how to be steady. I know how to love quietly. Hannah felt her eyes sting, not with sadness but with something beautiful and unexpected hope. I don't need perfect answers right now, she said gently. I just needed honesty, and you gave me that. They sat in silence again, but this time it felt different. Warm, safe, full of possibility. The storm outside slowly began to soften, the wind settling into calmer breaths, the rain turning to a steady, gentle patter. Eli leaned back slightly, exhaling as if he had been holding something inside for years. Hannah, he said in a quiet voice. Yes? We don't have to decide anything tonight. But we could talk. About what you want. About what I might want too. She nodded, heart full. I'd like that. As the night went on, they talked softly about their fears, their dreams, and the future, an uncertain but hopeful future neither of them had imagined before. The storm had brought them together in a way nothing else could have, and now, in the glow of a simple lantern, something gentle and real had begun to take shape. Something that felt like the beginning of a family, whatever shape that family might take. The storm passed during the early hours of the morning, leaving the air fresh and cool. When Hannah woke, she found Eli asleep in the old armchair near the kitchen. He must have stayed awake most of the night, checking the windows and listening for any sign of trouble. The lantern on the table had burned out, leaving only the soft morning glow filling the room. Hannah watched him for a moment. There was something calming about the way he slept, quiet and steady, just like the way he lived. She didn't want to wake him, but when she stepped closer to place a blanket over him, his eyes opened gently. You're awake, he said, his voice still soft from sleep. So are you, she whispered with a smile. You didn't have to stay all night. He sat up slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. I didn't want to leave you alone in the storm. Her heart warmed at his words. She had spent so many years handling life by herself that she almost forgot what it felt like to have someone watching out for her. The house was quiet, and for a moment they simply sat together, letting the stillness settle around them. Then Eli stood and looked out the window. The sun was rising over the hills, casting orange light across the fields. Looks like a good day for repairs, he said gently. Hannah laughed softly. You just woke up and you're already thinking about work, he shrugged in his shy, familiar way. Old habits. They had breakfast together, simple toast and fruit. Hannah made tea, while Eli fixed the back door latch that had come loose during the storm. It felt like an ordinary morning, yet something between them had changed. Their conversation the night before sat gently in the air, unspoken but felt. After eating, they stepped outside to check the property. The storm had knocked down a few branches and left puddles everywhere. But the damage was lighter than they expected. The sky was clear now, washed clean, and the valley smelled of fresh rain and earth. Eli walked beside her as they moved from the porch to the pasture. His steps were slow, thoughtful, as if he was thinking about something he wanted to say. Hannah felt it too, the sense that their lives were shifting, but in a good way. When they reached the fence line, Hannah stopped and touched the repaired boards. "Thank you again," she said, "for everything." Eli stood quietly for a moment, then leaned his hands on the fence. "Hannah, about what we talked about last night." She felt her heart beat a little faster. "Yes? I've been thinking about it. For a long time, actually." His voice was gentle, but she could hear the courage behind it. "I used to think my life would stay the same forever. Wake up, work the ranch, go to sleep, repeat. I didn't think there was space for anything bigger." Hannah listened carefully. He wasn't a man who shared his feelings easily. Every word mattered. "But then you came back," he continued, "and things didn't feel the same anymore. I started looking forward to seeing you. I liked helping you. I liked talking to you." He paused, searching for the right words. "I didn't know how to say it. I didn't want to make you uncomfortable. But I care about you, Hannah, more than I realized at first." Her breath caught quietly. "Eli." He shook his head slightly, not wanting her to feel pressured. "I'm not trying to rush anything. I just want you to know the truth. If you want to build a family someday, I want to be part of that. With you. But only if it's what you want too." Hannah felt warmth rise in her chest. For years, she had carried the weight of making decisions alone. But hearing Eli say those words slowly, honestly, bravely, felt like a door opening inside her heart. "I don't know how the future will look," she said softly, "but I want you in my life. I want to see where this goes. And yes, I want a family someday. I don't know when. I don't know how. But I want it. And I want someone beside me who is gentle, steady, and good." She met his eyes fully. "Someone like you." Eli's expression softened, almost shy. But there was a quiet happiness there too, like a man who had never expected to hear a dream spoken back to him. They spent the rest of the day working together. But the work felt different now. Every shared task carried a warmth that hadn't been there before. When she passed him tools, their hands brushed. When he explained how to tie a rope knot, he stood a little closer than usual. When she laughed at something he said, he looked at her longer, with a quiet wonder. As afternoon light settled over the land, they took a break under the big oak tree near the barn. Eli handed her a bottle of cold water he had kept in his truck, and she sat on the old wooden bench while he leaned against the tree trunk. The quiet between them was soft and comfortable. "I never asked," Hannah said after a moment, "why you never left this place." Eli looked out toward the pastures, where the cows were grazing peacefully. "This land is home. My parents loved it. I grew up here. And when they passed, it felt right to stay." He paused. "Sometimes I wondered what life in the city might be like. But I always thought I didn't fit in anywhere, except here." "You'd be surprised," Hannah said with a small smile. "You fit in more places than you think." He gave a shy smile back. "Maybe." They walked again when the sun began lowering toward evening. The sky turned gold and soft pink, painting the valley in warm colors. Watching the sunset together became an unspoken habit between them, something gentle and peaceful they shared without needing to explain. As they reached the hill behind the barn, the view opened wide. The ranch stretched out below them, glowing in the last light of the day. The moment felt important, though neither of them said it aloud. Eli took a breath. "Hannah, there's something else I want to say." She turned toward him, her heart steady. "I don't want us to rush. I don't want you to feel like you have to make decisions quickly." His voice was calm and sincere. "But if you ever choose a partner, someone to build a home and a family with, I want you to know I'd try my very best to be that person. Not because you asked for anything, but because I want to. Because I care." "Speak." Hannah felt her eyes grow warm. Not with sadness, but with something beautifully real. "Eli, I'm not asking for a perfect man. I just want someone I trust. Someone I can be honest with. Someone who listens and cares." She stepped closer, her voice soft. And that's you. It's been you for a while now. I just didn't know how to say it. He looked at her with a mixture of tenderness and disbelief, as if he had been waiting his whole life to hear those words. The breeze moved gently through the grass. Birds flew overhead, their wings catching the last sunlight. Everything around them felt peaceful, settled, hopeful. They stood together on the hill as the sun dipped lower, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Neither needed to hurry. Neither needed bold actions. The quiet closeness was enough, more than enough. Eli finally spoke, barely above a whisper. Whatever the future brings, I want to face it with you. Hannah nodded, her heart full. We'll face it together. As the sun slipped away, leaving the valley wrapped in soft twilight, they stayed on the hill a little longer, simply sharing the moment. It was the beginning of something new, something gentle, honest, and steady. Not a fast love, not a loud love, but a quiet love that grew the way good things do. Slowly, naturally, and with care. And though neither said the words aloud, both felt the truth settle inside them. This was the start of their family, whatever shape it would take, whatever future it would hold. Not because of one question, not because of one storm, but because they had finally found the courage to open their hearts and let each other in.